Today I want to discuss about how to use the SNOMED CT International Browser. It's a very powerful tool to browse through SNOMED CT concepts, and we'll be taking a look at that right now. So once you go to the website, which is browser.ihtsdotools.org, it's the worst acronym they ever came up with. But anyway, so you first agree to the license. So just click on accept right here. And here we have a lot of editions of SNOMED CT. So we have the international edition right here, but we also have the local editions and the Spanish edition and so on. So we will, and there is the UK edition, which is externally hosted right below everything else. So we'll take a look at the international edition in this video. So once you go inside, you are greeted with this layout. I'm just going to make this a little bigger for you. So you have two sections. One is the search section, and the other is the actual results that come on this side. By default, you are within the clinical findings concept, and you also have another view called taxonomy here. So that will render a tree of all the different concepts there are. So SNOMED CT actually consists of many sub-hierarchies. So like body structure, clinical finding, and situation, and substance. And these cover a wide variety of things like drugs, and again, clinical findings, events. So for now, we'll take a look at how to search using this search bar. So let's say you want to search for a concept. You just type in the concept, fever, for example, and it will get you fever. But the thing is, you can also search a little bit more complex things using this search bar. For example, show SHOUFRA right here. This will give us shoulder fracture. And let's just try that, SHOFRA. So this is the first three letters of any word in the concept. So you can type anything and it will just bring that up. You can just invert this and it will still work. FRA space SHO, fracture shoulder. And if I know that Zika fever is a thing, right? So I can just do ZIKFEV. So Zika fever, and I can also do FEZE, or no, it's ZI. So Zika fever. So this is a pretty powerful way to search because you don't need to type as much to get the concepts that you want. And let's see what SNOMED CT actually gives us on the once we get the results. So it gives us the main thing that we need to know about is the SCT ID. So this is called the SNOMED CT ID of this concept, and everything in SNOMED CT is a concept. So anything that you can possibly see is a concept, and a concept has descriptions and it has relationships. So this concept has two descriptions, which is Zika virus disease and Zika fever. All concepts also have a special type of description called a fully specified name. So that will be the Zika virus disease bracket disorder. So this includes something called the semantic tag, and we'll come to that later, but we'll take a look at relationships right now. So the concept can also have relationships, and that's what you can see here. Pathological process is an infectious process, and the causative agent is the Zika virus. So you may be asking me, hey, but how there are also parents and there are also children? They are nothing special in SNOMED CT. They are just another relationship of a concept. So if we go to the details in this tab, so you can see that these are all the different relationships a concept has. And you can see the is-a relationship is right alongside pathological process and causative agent. So you may find that the children are actually missing here. And that's because the children are not part of this concept. The children are actually part of their own concept. So in the congenital infection caused by Zika virus, we will then have an is-a relationship to Zika virus disease, just like so. It's also a congenital viral disease. So this is another thing about SNOMED CT is that it's a polyhierarchy, which means a concept can have multiple parents and a concept can have multiple children. So you don't have like a statistical hierarchy with ICD-10, for example, right? like a disease can only belong to one section, like it can only be in E or it can only be in J. But in SNOMED CT, a concept can belong to multiple hierarchies. And that's pretty useful because that's the nature of concepts, and it makes sense. So you see the SCT ID here. You can also search based on this code right here if you ever need to. So you'll be doing this if you already have the code and you want to know what this concept is. You can just paste the code in and you'll get the concept right here. So I told you about the disorder in the bracket here, right? That being called a semantic tag. So we'll just take a look at what a semantic tag is in a very, at a very high level. So let's say we go to the clinical findings hierarchy. So SNOMED CT itself has a few children directly. So clinical findings. Okay, this is harder than I thought. Clinical finding, yep, it's right here. So it's a direct descendant of the SNOMED CT main concept. And SNOMED CT has 19 such children, and clinical finding is one such concept. So under clinical finding, you have things like anything that you can describe in a clinical context. For example, the patient has a pain, the patient, came with a fever. So these things are clinical findings. You observe something about the patient. But there are also disorders. So something like a diagnosis, for example, tuberculosis or HIV. So these are disorder. Actually, HIV is also the virus, but in this case, I'm talking about AIDS. So let's go to that hierarchy. For example, if you keep searching under the descendants, I'm not able to find it here, so I'm just going to search here. For example, tuberculosis. So tuberculosis is a disorder, and you can see that the descendant, you can see the semantic tag has changed to disorder. Before this, it was finding for all clinical findings. So this is not really a separate hierarchy in SNOMED CT. It's within the clinical findings hierarchy, but if we keep going, you can see that it's under this concept called a disease, and this has the disorder semantic tag. So everything that falls under disease will then be having a semantic tag of disorder. So it usually is the case that it has a parent from where you get all of the semantic tags, but there are also situations where there is no particular parent from which the semantic tag is coming from. So for example, things like clinical drugs or real clinical drugs, they are based on the concept that a concept needs to have at least one trade name and one active ingredient. So things like that also can cause a semantic tag. Now in the browser, you can actually filter based on semantic tags. So when you're searching for tuberculosis, you only want disorders. So that will give you only the disorders, and you get all these different types of tuberculosis. If you don't choose that, you get things like family history of tuberculosis, for example. That's a situation. And mostly there are disorders, but again, tuberculosis status, this is an observable entity. An observable entity is like a question that you ask in an EHR. Like, what is the question? What is the status of tuberculosis for this patient? This is actually much well documented in LOINC, and they deal with a lot of observable entities. But yeah, we do have this hierarchy in SNOMED CT as well. So that is basically about how to search here and semantic tags. Now let's take a look at expression constraint query. So before that, I think try to look at all these different tabs. You can find all the reference sets a particular concept is part of using the simple, using the ref set tab, and the members will give you this concept as no members because so history, you can look at the history, you can look at other references. So that is it here. So we'll look at expression constraint queries now. So an expression constraint, ECL, stands for expression constraint language, and it's a very specific language defined by SNOMED. So SNOMED ECL, expression constraint language. We have this document right here which, so I'm just going to go into the examples straight. So this means descendant of, for example. So if you, I know you can search in the hierarchy also, you can just look at the concepts, but if you want to programmatically get something using your SNOMED server, for example, you'll be using ECLs. And you want only descendants of clinical findings. Let's execute that, and we'll see we get all of these different things which are clinical findings and disorders, because disorder is a child of clinical finding. But let's say we only want disorders. So then what do we do? So then you can also do, you can get the disorder concept. And this is the code, and this is the fully specified name. This is completely optional. You can get rid of this and it will still work. But it's useful to have something like this. In fact, it doesn't really matter what is given here, I think. Let's see. Yep, it still works. This is just for our reference to know, okay, this is what we're talking about. So let's disorder. Hope I didn't break their thing. Okay, yeah, disorder. We got disorder. So let's take a look at this code. So what if I want only disorders? So I just put a less than symbol. Okay, they also have this cool tool called ECL Builder, which you can use, but I'm not going to go into that. You can add refinements and things like that, but let's just stick to this for now. So disease, descendant of disease. So you'll only get disorders then. And you can even search other terms right here, and it will only get terms that match this, which are of type disorder. So you can actually execute more complex queries. Descendant or self of is kind of like, it's going to include the concept also. So it's going to include, for example, diabetes mellitus and all the subtypes of diabetes mellitus. So in this case, if we do, for example, if we search disease right here, so it will not give us the disease disorder concept itself. So for that, we need to put another less than sign, and we'll get the disease right here. So let's look at something more complex. So you can also get ancestors of, you can get parent of, you can get member of. So member of is pretty important because we'll use this a lot to get things from a reference set, and you can make reference sets yourself. It's not that hard. So let's say that we want a particular reference set. So reference sets are also concepts in SNOMED CT. They are just a list of other concepts. So let's see, for example, ICD-10, that I know there is a, okay, no. Complex. Why am I doing this? There is actually a really easy way to do this. On the side, you can also filter based on reference sets. So we have CT3 simple map reference set, ICD-10 complex map reference set. So these things map to ICD-10. So I am just going to look at a concept, for example. Let's take a look at tuberculosis. So in tuberculosis, if you go to the ref set tab, you see that it's part of multiple simple ref sets. So international patient summary is IPS, which is given out to other people as a, as a reference set by SNOMED CT International themselves. Same thing for global patient set. This is all free terms that SNOMED CT gives out to everyone, even without a SNOMED CT license. So let's take this ID. So this is the ref set ID. So I'm just going to search for concepts within the global patient set. So this will give me simple terms that are not, okay, so there is nothing called disease itself, but let's just search. Okay, so I'm using descendant or child of, so, and it just gives me the global patient set. But what we want is the member of, which will be this caret symbol. So let's execute that, and you get a lot of things. But if we search for tuberculosis, we know for a fact that it exists. We'll also get other things with tuber in it. So I think this doesn't cache our results, so I'm not sure multiple people have searched for this. So we got tuberculosis, when we also get body structure and we get other things. So we can also chain multiple queries together by using AND. So if we want something to be part of the global patient set and for it to be a disorder, we just do something like, okay, let's just copy clinical findings from here. So this means it needs to be part of the global patient set, and it needs to be a a descendant of clinical finding. So let's execute that. So we then get very common terms with tuber in them, right? So these are not as complicated as the full SNOMED CT International edition, but we do get quite a bit we get 25 hits. So let's look at something a little bit more complex. Okay, so this is a compound expression. So this is again very similar to what we just did. You can have two queries and you can then combine them. So if you want to know a disorder of the lungs that are also edema of the trunk, so this will probably be like lung disorders that are associated with edema. So right off my head, I can probably think of pulmonary edema and other things like that. So ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, pulmonary edema, acute pulmonary edema, and all other different types of pulmonary edema. So that's what they mean. Now you can also put a bracket and you can express this and this and this or this. It keeps getting more and more complex. So you can have a look at this website. So I'm just going to show you one really complex one and try to explain what it means. Okay, so attribute relationship. Okay, so this will be interesting. Okay, so this is a pretty big query. So what this means is that it needs to be a descendant of clinical finding that then has a finding site of anything that is within the pulmonary valve structure, and it needs to have associated morphology of any child or self of stenosis. So I know this looks complex, and this is why the ECL builder tool becomes very useful for constructing things like this. But yeah, we do get 32 concepts that have this particular relationship. So let's see. Mild pulmonary valve stenosis. It's going to be a descendant of clinical finding with finding structure, pulmonary valve structure, and stenosis. So these things hit. And let's just try out the ECL builder now. So right now, this has actually done the refinements for us already. So the output what we gave, this so the refinements will be self or descendant of finding structure. Now let's try something more. So and let's make it descendant of. Okay, let's see. I hope this searches. Nope, it doesn't search. So this is where the MRCM really comes in handy. So you do when we look at something like, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at prosthetic pulmonary valve stenosis. Let's take a look at the summary. So we have all of these different relationships here, like the finding site, the associated morphology, after associated with. So how do we know which concept has which relationships? So that is actually defined in the machine readable concept model, or MRCM. So if you go to the MRCM and explore here, for example, clinical finding. So it tells you clinical finding can have all of these attributes, right? So the clinical finding can have finding site, but it also tells you that the finding site, if you click here, it tells you the range of the finding site. So it tells you that clinical finding can have finding site, but you need to make sure that the finding site is within anatomical or acquired body structure. So it makes sense, it makes sense to only have such finding sites, right? It doesn't make a sense to have finding site of fever. So that's why these things exist. So that's the expression, and that's no modification. But the machine MRCM is really powerful. You can use this to really construct queries on the fly. You can even construct your own concepts based on the MRCM. So that is actually pretty much it. That's a really high level overview of the SNOMED City International Browser and what it can do. There is a lot of things that I didn't really go into, but that's for you to explore. So hope you enjoyed this video, and leave a like if you liked it and subscribe for more content. I also have started a newsletter on my website medblocks.org. So do visit and subscribe if you want to be updated about new content. And thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.